CSS3 storytelling. There are many CSS3 animation examples scattered throughout the web. We've seen them. Image hover effects, a rotating solar system, and even an animated Dr. Zoidberg from Futurama. I could watch that all night, actually. And have. Sorry. These techniques, while useful, are only the beginning. They're just meant to give us a common vocabulary of CSS3 animation skills. Most are simple experiments. Few are useful, finished products. We web developers are used to styling text and layout. Like photographs, these things don't move very much. Most of us are not used to creating any type of animation without a proprietary tool like Adobe Flash. So yes, these introductory tutorials are valuable to get us started thinking in a new direction. But we need to remember that's all they are, a start. Now, it's time to move beyond the basics. We've really only scratched the surface of what CSS3 animations are capable of. And as an industry, I think we're ready for a new challenge. So let's take a look at how we can take some of those basic techniques that we've learned and turn them and put them together into a useful, finished product. The first thing we must do to take advantage of this kind of CSS3 animation is to alter our thinking. Displaying entire web pages at once is akin to taking a photograph and displaying it all at once. It all occurs at once, there's no motion, it's just there. But what if instead of photos, what if instead of taking photos, we imagined we were directing a movie? I love this photo. That is legendary director Martin Scorsese wearing a Clash t-shirt, stage directing Robert De Niro in the ring during Raging Bull. Love this movie. What we need to think about now is that we are like Scorsese. We're the directors. Actors, like De Niro, are notoriously temperamental. So it's important throughout this production to remember who's in charge. We are. We gather our actors, in this case, HTML5 markup and images, tell them where to go using CSS3, how to behave using JavaScript and jQuery, on a stage, the web browser, and then tie it all together with a soundtrack to create a very compelling story. You'll no doubt recognize that HTML5, CSS3, images, JavaScript, and audio are all building blocks of the web. We're dealing with web standards, not proprietary solutions. We're going to take a look at an actual animation that I created for a well-known client. It's a few minutes long. If you'll indulge me, I want you all to see ahead of time what it is we're going to go through the process of building. So bear with me for just a moment. Get the screen.
Meet Alex. He developed a need. Luckily for Alex, this isn't a disaster. Yes, Alex has enjoyed his cyborg smartphone, but recently, for a number of reasons, has been considering the new MyPhone. Still not convinced, he needs perspective. On the way to his new job, it's time for Alex to connect with his trusted network of experts. His friends are quick to comment. Things start to clear up for Alex when a peer from his new firm adds a comment. Alex's network of friends help him get past his initial doubts. It's time for him to do his own research. Everyone has their favorite place to begin. Alex jumps head first and swims through video reviews and feature lists of the newest product models. After researching third-party sites, he's almost there, but not ready to commit just yet. He decides to go directly to the product vendor to get the detail he needs. It doesn't take long for the brand to reach out directly to Alex, in hopes of helping him with the next natural step. Pleasantly surprised with a friendly chat, he considers it, especially since a website that recognized his location just made this experience meaningful. Excited, he decides to continue his interaction with this brand. His morning routine at the new firm passes quickly, and Alex leaves for his appointment at the MyPhone flagship store to see it for himself. Impressed with the flagship store, his first physical interaction with the brand leaves him in awe and excited for more. Rose meets Alex in the store and hands him the phone. He's blown away. It's love at first touch. The interaction with the brand continues to impress him. While purchasing the MyPhone, he's automatically eligible for a 15% discount because of the firm he works for. Alex is happy. He tweets about his new purchase. Immediately, his network responds. Now, Alex wants to call Lisa. His phone contacts are not set up, but it's simple to figure out. He calls support by clicking on My Phone Help, the first number stored on his new phone. The rep knows who he is and confirms his contacts are in the cloud. Alex is relieved. This was seamless. The great service continues. Alex is open to a deal suggested by the agent, 30% off an earpiece and case for the new phone. He selects the case, but needs more time for the earpiece. 2 weeks later, Alex finds Rose's business card and MyPhone packaging. It has a description for self-service via Twitter, inviting any questions regarding the product. He tries it. Alex is taken back at the immediate response from the brand in his Twitter mentions. He clicks on the link, and a list of top 5 earpiece accessories appear, with other relevant topics below. The immediacy and relevance of the interaction is impressive. He uses his phone app to purchase the earpiece, and the receipt comes to him through SMS. Alex looks back at his interactions with the brand and realizes it didn't matter whether he was buying the phone or using the phone. Each interaction was a great customer experience.
So what you just saw is about 3.5 minutes of 29 images, text overlaid on top of it, using JavaScript and CSS to create the motion in between, and then some extra details that we're going to get into soon to actually sync all of that animation with the audio.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Okay.
All right. Before you produced this, as in a film,
Yes.
did you sit down, kind of have a script, have an animator, kind of direct what he would do, or?
So the question was, did I have a script? And the answer was absolutely, and that's something we're about to get into. I was lucky enough to work as part of a larger team that included art directors, some animators, and some really great other developers who were with me. So yes, absolutely, I started with a script. So let's take a look at how we put all that together using the script. But first, a quick note. Something I want to get out of the way right up front. Throughout the following example, you'll see I only used the -WebKit vendor-specific prefix for some experimental CSS styles. This real-world client animation was developed specifically for a well-known company's sales and marketing team to have on their iPads to take around and show people. Despite that, you can easily add whatever vendor-specific prefixes you need to support whatever project you're going to do with CSS styles in your project. So without further delay, let's get into it. Markup. We'll set the mood. The animation I've created, as I mentioned, has 29 scenes. Each scene, as you saw, consisted of an image with text in front of it that's acting as a caption. We're going to take all of those static images, set them in motion, style the effects, and then add an audio soundtrack to tie it all together. Meet your new best friend, Royal Slider. This is a touch-enabled image gallery and content slider, and it's the easiest way I found to get HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript, images, and audio to start behaving like the stars in our movie that they are. Developed by Dmitry Semenov, Royal Slider saved me days of work. Without it, this project would have taken much longer and frankly been much more painful. What Royal Slider does is think of a presentation like this one. You have a scene, you click a button, it moves to the next scene. Click or move or do something, it moves to the next scene. And really what you were seeing there is an example of that. One image going to the next, going to the next, going to the next. So they have several templates available, and the slider with animated blocks is the template that you'll see I base the rest of this markup on. So for this example, we need to think of everything in the document object model as a character in our animated movie. Think of the DOM as a way to visualize the hierarchy of everything in our markup. If you need to brush up on the concept of the DOM, this is a link to an excellent World Wide Web Consortium article. It's important to remember that every bit of text, every image, everything that's in our markup, and therefore in our DOM, is capable of being instructed upon by CSS3 and JavaScript. This is the start of my markup. For the sake of space, you'll see I've included just 2 divs. Each one of those represents a scene in our animation. I very purposely started each one with a class slide 1, slide 2. The next one, as you can probably guess, slide 3, and so on, all the way down to slide 29. And you'll see in this markup, we've got that caption that was appearing on top of the images. The image itself, and I made sure that the alt tag for each image matched the caption. So I took this, and like I said, I made 29 of these with every scene listed. Now, one could argue, as designer Andy Clark did, that rather than using a wrapper div to contain all of those divs, you could instead use an ordered list with multiple list items inside of it instead. After all, this does occur in a sequence. It is an order. Whatever you use, make it meaningful and consistent. Typically, after handcrafting our markup, we usually reach for CSS next to start styling things. Now, CSS3 rocks. I love it, but it still needs a little help from its friend JavaScript. And in this case, we're going to go straight to our JavaScript to set our captions and images in motion. Here's how. Royal Slider has a bunch of built-in files, one of which is an autoplay.js file. And what this is going to do is start our sequence immediately without us having to click or hover or do anything other than open it. And that's going to create a smooth transition between each of the divs. This is where Royal Slider comes in really handy. You could spend days developing your own scripts and styles to accomplish the same thing. But I'll tell you, I saved so much time and effort using something that's already proven and already works. So I didn't have to spend extra development cycles rewriting something that works so well. So when you do check out the demo later and watch the video as well, you're going to find this file, jquery.rs.autoplay.js. That's the file I was just mentioning. Pay close attention to this one. It's built on the JavaScript framework, and that alone justified the $12 cost of using Royal Slider for me. Frankly, if Seminoff had charged 10 times that amount, it still would have been worth it to me. It's really that valuable. So one thing to pay attention to in that autoplay file is this little content attribute, data rs delay. Remember that, because coming up soon, it's going to be critical for our timing. For this animated project, the art director wanted a simple, automatic, zoom in, zoom out effect for each image. You saw them, they're going in and out. As each image in the sequence is displayed, zoom the first one in, zoom the next one out, the next one in, the next one out. This is nothing too dramatic or fancy. It's just enough to draw the viewer into this already immersive animated story that's being told. There we go. We've seen this kind of effect before. It's like I said, a gentle zoom in, zoom out effect that documentary filmmaker Ken Burns has put to such good use over the years with still photographs. Burns has used it so much that it's really become a technique that's really identified with him. It makes him instantly recognizable. So we're going to dig deeper into the CSS3 transform that allows this to happen. That's quite a bit of code. But what's happening here is I'm creating some keyframe animations. I start with the first one. I call it Ken Burns in. Pretty semantic. It's that zoom in effect. You'll see the next one, Ken Burns out. Zoom out. What's happening with the transform is I'm saying when the animation starts, the scale at 1 means 100%. At full zoom, we're moving to 1.1, which is 110%. So it's just a gentle zoom in. And then I'm taking the Ken Burns out effect and doing exactly the opposite. I'm starting at 110%, and by the end of the animation, pulling it back to 100. I then defined some common attributes for both of those. So there's a 0.4 second delay before the animation starts. I defined that each animation would be 1.3 seconds. So total, that's 1.7. So it takes 0.4 seconds before it starts, and then the entire duration of the zoom in is 1.4. Excuse me, 1.3. So filled in a few other details, including the origin of the transform. So what's happening is, okay, this is your left. So it's zooming this way as opposed to this way. I found that doing it from the center felt very unnatural. It felt like, you know that little like woodpecker thing on a little, you see them bobbing back and forth? You ever seen that thing? That thing's really annoying. That's what that animation felt like when I had it zooming from the center. So I got rid of that. I had it instead, I stuck it up to the left corner, zoomed it out this way. It actually felt much more like what Ken Burns was doing. It felt like maybe I had hit on something. Lastly, I just said, hey, when I use the class of Ken Burns in, run the in animation. When I use out, run the out animation. So this looks like a lot of code, maybe, but it's actually pretty concise for what it needs to do. So what we want to think about is that we're creating individual animations within an overall animation. So these are very subtle, and that's good. Be gentle to your viewer. There's no reason to hit him over the head. So now you've noticed in my markup, to the first div, I've added the class of Ken Burns in. So I know the first scene, it's zooming in. The next scene, it's Ken Burns out. So we're starting at 110% and zooming back to 100. So this alternating pattern will continue throughout the rest of my markup. So all 29 divs, in, out, and so on. That's what achieved the effect you saw of each of those images zooming in and out. So far, we've made our actors move around stage without talking. So congratulations, it's the 21st century and we've made a silent movie. So the thing we have left to do is bring in an audio soundtrack and time it to all the code we've created. So we're going to call this simple bit of HTML5 audio as our narrative soundtrack. When I first created this animation, I only had to support Safari on the iPad, as I mentioned. So this MP4 file actually works great for that browser on that platform. If you're going to support other browsers and other platforms, you may need to resave your audio in multiple formats. Do whatever you need to do to serve your audience best. Remember this guy from earlier? It's the thing from the autoplay.js file. I said, pay attention to that. Well, what we're going to do is incorporate that into our markup. So here you've seen each of our divs now has this data.rs delay and a value. What the heck is that? Well, these data dash values are kind of like wildcards, meaning it's a way for CSS or JavaScript or both to hook into something and perform some sort of action that might not ordinarily be possible. What Royal Slider is doing for us here is we're setting a custom delay. So you notice all the animation was happening at different times. If I just let CSS run by itself, it all happens at exactly the same time. Maybe 1 second or 2 seconds, however long, it keeps occurring at that interval. I didn't want that. To sync with my audio, I needed to be able to have custom intervals, have these things change at different times. So luckily, this makes that possible. And we're going to look at how. This is an audio editor called Fission. It's a Mac product. It costs a couple bucks. I think it's great. There's another one called Audacity that's available for Mac, Windows, and even Linux. That's a free one. That works just as well. What I did is I loaded my audio file into this editor, pressed play, and I started listening and determining where I needed each scene to change. And so when I would hear that place in the audio where I needed it to change, I'd hit pause. And then, I know some of you up front can probably see this, I don't know how well the folks in the back can see it, but down here at the bottom of Fission, it's showing, there is another monitor in the back for those of you further back. It's showing a value of 1765. And so what I did is I went through my audio, like I said, I paused every time I wanted the scene to change, and I recorded those values. So you're going to see, back to that markup, in that first div, there's our delay of 1765. So I went through each one, like I said, and paused and recorded that value. The second div I want it changed at another interval, 1834 in this case. Sometimes, depending on the content I had, sometimes that value was quite small, quite short. Other times, I need that image to stay up there for a while. And that number ended up being much larger. This alone gives you, well, this gives you the ability to sync audio with your markup and style and allow things to happen at custom intervals. This is something I think that we're actually missing in a lot of the animation that we see, the animation experiments that we see online. Too many of it just occurs at regular intervals, and life doesn't work that way. We don't walk at the same speed. We don't talk at the same speed. We don't do much at the same speed, frankly. So things like this can make animation feel much, much more natural.
Good question.
Yes?
Were those numbers accurate, or did you have to fudge them a little bit?
Well,
Things that sync.
the question is, were those numbers accurate, or did I need to fudge a little? And the answer is, I actually had to listen through that audio multiple times. I didn't do it all in one shot. I'd have to be pretty darn good to do that. And in this case, yeah, I definitely listened through that audio multiple times, and hitting pause, you know, we're talking about milliseconds. So those numbers, each time I listened through, those numbers were close to each other, but not always the same. So what I did is I listened through multiple times, recorded values multiple times, and then sort of played with the numbers to find happy places, so that in the actual animation it would feel more natural. So it's important to make things feel natural rather than aim for a scientific number in this case. I mean, yeah. So those data dash attributes, like I said, they're very powerful. You can think of those as wildcards, as I said, sort of generic handlers to hook into with CSS and JavaScript. I'm convinced that we've only started scratching the surface of what these attributes are capable of doing. The RS delay is only one possible data dash attribute. So watch this space, because I think we're gearing up for a blockbuster sequel, so yes.
Did you have a shortcut to test the frames at the end of the animation, or did you have to watch through the entire animation?
So the question was, did I have a shortcut to watch through the animations, or did I just have to listen through the whole thing? And I'll tell you, I would have loved to have a shortcut. So when actually getting that audio synced to the visual, I was listening through it and watching it every time. I got to know that script pretty well. But you know, I think wouldn't a movie director do the same? They'd go through, they wouldn't just skip over here. You know, see this thing. Maybe if it's hours long, that might be different. But when it's 3.5 minutes, I think that's doable. So yeah, I did that manually, listened through each time, and really got that timing down. And if I found times that number that I came up with wasn't quite right, I spent the extra time to alter the number and to find that sweet spot to make sure the transition felt natural.
So there's no way to start the animation at a specific keyframe?
I'll tell you that if there is a way to start the animation at a specific keyframe, I would love to know what it is.
I was going to suggest maybe a couple HTML files that you play for each.
Possibly.
Each thing?
I was limited with this is an actual client project, as I said. This is not just some laboratory experiment. So I had a finite amount of time in which to work. And I did the best I could within that amount of time to create this project for this client. So if somebody comes up with a way to be able to jump right to a keyframe and be able to start from there, I would love to know what it is. And in fact, I hope that person is here tonight and can then present it to all of us the next time, because I'd love to know. Yes?
My question is this whole package delivered locally on the machine that's being shown in the sales scenario, or is this being delivered on the web, and is there really syncing going on, or is it dependent on where it's hosted, I guess?
So the question is about where this is stored, whether it's locally on a machine or accessed remotely on the web. And because this was a sales and marketing team that had this app loaded on their iPads, and they couldn't always rely on having Wi-Fi access, this whole app was loaded locally, and that allows things to start up very quickly. The animation doesn't have to delay or anything before loading. So in this case, everything was stored locally, and so whether they had Wi-Fi or not, they were able to show it. This is actually part of a larger app that was much more detailed, that told some other stories, had some other stuff going on that wasn't germane to CSS3 animation. That's why I didn't bring it in. And in fact, actually, through JavaScript, created the ability to play, pause, and seek through that animation. So.
I have a question.
Yes.
Could this have just as easily been done in Flash, but you just decided to do it in this form to try it out? Not for the iPad.
The question is, could this have been done in Flash? Sure. Could it have been seen on an iPad? Nope. There was my decision right there. The decision was made for me, frankly. Flash is a non-starter, literally and figuratively, on the iPad and the iPhone. So this is also an opportunity to kind of stretch what web standards are capable of. We've seen, like I said earlier, we've seen some of this CSS3 animation going on. It's pretty simple stuff. This was an opportunity to push it to another level. And I'm actually going to come back to that soon.
Throw one more question.
Yes?
Just wondering why you went with class instead of div. I mean, class instead of IDs on the div.
It's the first thing I reached for. And if you want to use IDs, that would be just fine. Can't think of a reason that you couldn't do that. So sure. There we have it. So as we saw, and I'll show it again, it's an animated web story using HTML5, CSS3, audio, JavaScript, jQuery, some images. We've gone from a simple laboratory-based CSS3 animation effect to fully animated CSS storytelling. But I don't think this is the end of the story, not by a long shot. In years to come, I imagine sequel after sequel, S-E-Q-U-E-L, not S-Q-L. And I think soon we're going to be animating facial expressions, can make a character talk, and we're going to create some smooth animation effects that even our Flash friends will be jealous of. Our audiences will demand it. Thank you so much. I'm going to take the opportunity to replay the animation. We covered a lot, as I said to begin with. And so I want you to understand and see this thing once again. So you're going to see all 29 of these images move by. Each one zooms in, the next one zooms out, zoom in, zoom out. You'll see the caption on top of each one. The caption, I think, is really important. If for some reason the audio breaks, we still have a cohesive experience. We can read what's going on. Even if the images break, we still have narrative text there telling the entire story. So let's take a look one more time.
Meet Alex. He developed a need. Luckily for Alex, this isn't a disaster. Yes, Alex has enjoyed his cyborg smartphone, but recently, for a number of reasons, has been considering the new MyPhone. Still not convinced, he needs perspective. On the way to his new job, it's time for Alex to connect with his trusted network of experts. His friends are quick to comment. Things start to clear up for Alex when a peer from his new firm adds a comment. Alex's network of friends help him get past his initial doubts. It's time for him to do his own research. Everyone has their favorite place to begin. Alex jumps head first and swims through video reviews and feature lists of the newest product models. After researching third-party sites,
as it's changing while it's synced to the audio, it feels very natural.
He decides to go directly to the product vendors.
Some of these stay up longer than others.
It doesn't take long for the brand to reach out directly to Alex.
This one's been there for a while.
Helping him with the next natural step.
And now we move to the next one.
Pleasantly surprised at the friendly chat, he considers it, especially since a website that recognized his location.
That's all that RS
makes
data
experience
delay.
Meaningful.
The data-RS delay, providing those custom intervals.
His morning routine at the new firm passes quickly, and Alex leaves for his appointment at the MyPhone flagship store to see it for himself. Impressed with the flagship store, his first physical interaction with the brand leaves him in awe and excited for more. Rose meets Alex in the store and hands him the phone. He's blown away. It's love at first touch. The interaction with the brand continues to impress him. While purchasing the MyPhone, he's automatically eligible for a 15% discount because of the firm he works for. Alex is happy. He tweets about his new purchase. Immediately, his network responds.
It feels very natural.
Now, Alex wants to call Lisa. His phone contacts are not set up, but it's simple to figure out. He calls support by clicking on My Phone Help, the first number stored on his new phone. The rep knows who he is and confirms his contacts are in the cloud. Alex is relieved. This was seamless. The great service continues. Alex is open to a deal suggested by the agent. 30% off an earpiece and case for the new phone. He selects the case, but needs more time for the earpiece. 2 weeks later, Alex finds Rose's business card and MyPhone packaging. It has a description for self-service via Twitter, inviting any questions regarding the product. He tries it. Alex is taken back at the immediate response from the brand in his Twitter mentions. He clicks on the link, and a list of top 5 earpiece accessories appear, with other relevant topics below. The immediacy and relevance of the interaction is impressive. He uses his phone to purchase the earpiece and receipt comes to him through SMS. Alex looks back at his interactions with the brand and realizes it didn't matter whether he was buying the phone or using the phone. Each interaction was a great customer experience.
What other questions can I answer? Yes?
What's the approximate size of all those assets?
I'll find out and get back to you.
Okay.
So hit me before we leave and I'll find out.
All right, and related to that, is that, the size that we're seeing is a portion of the browser window. Is this, would that on the iPad be the full size of it?
So there were 2 questions. The first was, what is the size, file size of this whole package? And I can quickly tell you that the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, quite small, they're text files. The images, 1 to 2 meg for 29 of them. The audio was by far the largest. That was over 6. That audio file is more than 6 meg. But even altogether, that's still under 10 meg for that whole thing. And if you want a specific, really specific number, come see me afterward and I can get that for you. The other question was about size. You saw that it wasn't exactly the aspect ratio of an iPad. And I mentioned this is actually this is removed from a larger application, and there was other stuff going on. But like I said, I didn't want to show that because it wasn't germane to tonight's topic, and it was really about CSS animation. So yes. Yes?
From, I guess, an experience standpoint, you said this was delivered on an iPad in a physical store setting?
It was not a physical store setting. These were delivered on an iPad to sales and marketing teams at a company you've heard of.
Okay. So I was just wondering how the audio was really listened to, or if people had to read it. I imagine like a public scenario, and it would be kind of cluttered sound-wise.
Sure, and that's a good point. So the question was about being in a situation, it could be pretty loud, it could be noisy, how would you hear it? And that's a good question. Actually, the company that this was created for has a very large conference every year, and these iPads were set at tables at the conference, and yeah, people couldn't hear it. It was a big noisy conference, people couldn't hear it. But what this app was used for primarily was for individuals on sales and marketing teams at a potential client site where, much like this, they would have an audience's attention and could play this thing so that people could hear it. And like I said, even if for some reason the audio didn't load or it was noisy, the captions were there so people could read. So we had quite a few bases covered. So yes.
What would be the advantage of this over something like an After Effects animation?
The advantage of this over After Effects. I haven't worked with After Effects.
Or like a short movie, like just a little animation movie that you could put on the local machine.
I haven't done a lot of movie work, frankly. Not After Effects anyway. And so that's difficult for me to answer. I can tell you that, well, what type of file format would After Effects save to?
You could export to like a .mov or anything really, MP4.
That's is a potentially interesting way to go. The mandate here was for web standards, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and so we were kind of stretching what those things are capable of doing together.
So this animation was almost automatic. It plays from start to ending regardless of what the user wants to do. I've seen websites in the past where it's almost a parallax and a scrolling thing where you can scroll down the page and the animations come up as you scroll down. And it's almost self-guided. Could any of the techniques that you showed tonight be used for adapting to this parallax paradigm?
You could potentially start an animation like this, and parallax could be going on at the same time.
But is there any hook in to figure out how fast the user is scrolling or where they are on the page, things like that?
Boy, trying to time something with how fast someone is scrolling, I think could be pretty hairy. I think that could be difficult. I'd love to see it tried, and if you do it successfully, I'd love to see it.
Could that be stopped in the middle?
This demonstration that I showed you tonight cannot. However, the overall application, remember this was just one piece of a larger application. The overall application did have JavaScript, additional JavaScript plugins to allow play, pause, and seek. So I could actually like jump through this animation or pause it at any time with a touch.
I have one more question.
Yes.
I'm an accessibility analyst, and I just noticed on your alt tags, they were the exact same as that text.
That's right.
And for blind people, that text in the P tags would have been read to them. So it's actually just supposed to be conveying what the images show.
I don't, while that's what the spec says, I don't think that anyone would be losing an experience viewing what was in my alt tags.
They wouldn't know there's a little girl in the picture.
But that's fine.
I think you're also saying it's redundant, right?
Well, it is redundant for
it's
them.
redundant.
And the other thing is the information that you'd be giving to a blind person isn't the same information you're giving to sighted people.
Wouldn't they just be listening to the story, though?
Right.
Well, the W3C says they should get the same information as a sighted person.
For an animation?
So they would be.
For everything. Yeah, for everything. So you know.
I want to be able to choose between them, probably.
Yeah.
The choice is made for the company that this was created for and their potential clients.
Yeah, right.
And frankly, they know their potential clients better than I do. If you wanted to put more descriptive alt tags in there, by all means, please do so. That doesn't affect the overall animation approach. I think it would be a nice add-on to have, sure. Yes?
Putting this together, what went well and what was wrong?
Question was, when putting this together, what went well and what were problems? And I'll tell you, the biggest problem was the barrier to entry. I'm a front-end guy. HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, I've done like 75 plus websites in 18 years. Now, I'm used to displaying it all at once. How am I going to do this? I had to wrap my brain around the idea of showing one thing, then showing another, then showing another. And once I could get my brain around that, I could start to develop techniques to make that happen. So yeah, definitely the biggest hurdle for me was just, how the heck am I going to do this? So the things that went easy were the things I was comfortable with. Taking that text and putting it up there and styling it real nice, that works great. Optimizing image file sizes, that works great. Creating clean semantic markup, that works great. The Ken Burns effect actually came together relatively easily. It was really just wrapping my mind around how to do this. And frankly, that's why I'm bringing this to you with the analogy of going from photographs to movies. If we can start to think of our markup, style, JavaScript, and related assets as things that can occur in sequence, then we can start creating more animation like this and much more detailed things as well. Yes?
You know, I think going back to the question that I asked you earlier, I think what I'm asking is, what was your role in the whole thing? I know you put it together, you did all the coding, but I mean, when you sat down with the group, they said, you know, we want this, we want that. I mean, you have to go back and say, because the way you're describing it is that you normally would do it linear, you know, one page or one thing at a time. So, did you come up with this, with the idea to use this technique? I mean, you kind of heard what the director and what everyone's saying, and for various reasons, this made the most sense. I guess that's what I'm asking. When as front-end developers, where's our role in pulling this together?
So the question was about what my role was, other than being the developer. I was at the table. Frankly, as a developer, I always want to be at the table. I don't like people making decisions for me. I like being involved. I don't like being at the far end of the tail. So in this case, the group that I worked with is a group that's known for creating animated projects in a proprietary format. And this was one of the earlier projects that they had created or wanted created using web standards. So they originally had a proprietary format that told this thing, I believe Java was included and all sorts of, and much, much more than that. And so my goal was to take this animation that had been created and recreate it for the web. I didn't go into that very much because I wanted to really kind of keep the focus on the technique.
Well, to me, it's both.
Well, you're absolutely right, and that's very fair. And I think the next time I show this, I'm going to talk more about creating a script.
Because, I mean, after all, that's what we bring to the table.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. So I'm very glad to hear you say that. Yes?
Do you think it's possible to have multiple divs overlaid, maybe with C-index or something, and have them do their own, you know,
sure,
transitions?
So the question is about having multiple divs relating to each other and using perhaps Z-index.
So you could get a real 3D aspect going on.
Absolutely. In fact, the text that's sitting, I mean, this is a super simple example, but the text that's sitting on top of those images is accomplished through a Z-index. Because typically, you're not going to have HTML text sitting on top of an image that way. So is it possible to extend that technique? I believe absolutely yes it is. And in fact, I wonder, I'm just brainstorming this now, could that data dash attribute be used to dynamically change a Z-index for a larger animation?
Whoa.
And I think we're brainstorming the sequel already.
Using less or less?
If you would like. Sure.
Can you do something with nth child?
You could do lots of things with nth child, yes. What else can I answer? Yes?
You put up a screen, you said that it was a lot of code.
Yeah.
I saw like maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 lines. How much, that was a piece of something
Sure,
larger, right?
absolutely.
How many lines were there actually?
I can look that up
Yeah.
if you would like.
Yeah,
The question was, I put up some CSS and I said, hey, that's a lot of code. That was a lot of code for a slide. It was, yes, it was this much of an overall CSS file. The other CSS file had to, or the rest of the CSS file had primarily to do with styling that text, styling the other stuff around that animation that we weren't looking at. But it was nothing nothing out of the ordinary in terms of file size.
So I mean, I understand it was primarily done in CSS.
Yes.
But you had to do, you had some JavaScript. What did you have to put in some jQuery?
The row slider is a jQuery based, yes.
So how much of that was actually, like how many lines of actual like, JavaScript non-CSS code did you have?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Which, it was definitely a minority though, right?
In the minority
most of your code
compared
was CSS.
I'm curious what we're driving toward.
Because I want to, this is a presentation about CSS, right?
Yes.
And I'm just, when you showed that, I was just kind of curious about where a lot of the logic is. You know?
A lot of the logic is in the autoplay.js file, just to get things moving and set those custom intervals. And so, in my opinion, there's no such thing as a pure CSS animation. CSS always needs help from markup. CSS by itself doesn't do anything. It styles markup. And their best friend is JavaScript. They always go out together. They hang out. They're BFF. So using them together in this demonstration felt very natural. Anything else I can answer?
I think you should plug your book.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say, and I believe that as one of the raffles tonight, we'll be giving away a copy of my book. I wrote HTML5 Multimedia Development Cookbook. I wrote that before I wrote this, so unfortunately this is not in that. But this is your opportunity to get a free copy if you are the raffle winner. So, and I think with that, I want to thank you all for coming tonight.